Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me.
So let's jump right in. I saw your speech this afternoon. I enjoyed it. I got to say, I was struck by the disparity between your speech and comments that I saw former Vice President Biden make this week. You spoke quite a bit about movements that are endangering America. And the vice president said that it was basically one man. He also said that he was the solution for that one man problem. What is your solution? Tell us what the movement that you think is threatening America and what is your solution? I'm curious as to the disparity there.
Well, it's not only, sadly enough, an American effort. It is global, and that is we're looking at a merger of oligarchy, systems around the world which are controlled by extraordinarily wealthy billionaires, and authoritarianism, and that's kind of what's going on in this country. And what people like Trump and other people around the world do is to retain power, is they try to divide their people up by appealing to the most basest instincts and focus the anger of the people on minorities, whether they are religious minorities, whether they are immigrants, whether they are part of the LGBT community, or people who have a different religion than the majority. But the point that I made today is that as a nation, we have got to recognize that the best way to defeat oligarchy and the best way to defeat authoritarianism is to bring people together around a progressive agenda, an agenda which guarantees economic rights as human rights. And the point that I made is that way back in 1944, in a not well-publicized State of the Union speech, Franklin Roosevelt said something very profound. He said, you know what? We have a Bill of Rights in this country that protects our political rights, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, etc. But we do not have anything that protects our economic as human rights. So you can, you can march and you can protest, but there is no guarantee that you can have a job that pays you a living wage. You can have any religion you want, but there is no guarantee that when you get sick, you're going to have the resources to go to a doctor, or if you're an elderly person, afford the prescription drugs that you need to stay alive. So the theme of today is that economic rights must be considered as human rights, and that is the need to continue what Roosevelt began some 80 years ago.
So I'm curious as to how it could be that there is this type of disparity in perception of the problem. I mean, having gone through the past 8 years prior to Donald Trump and frankly the decades before that as well, that people can have such radically different vision of what the problem is, the scale of it, the structure of it.
Right. Well, I think that has a lot to do with media, frankly, in this country, which is owned by large corporations. And, I'm not one like Donald Trump who believes that there's fake news out there, or the media is the enemy of the people. That's nonsense, of course, and dangerous. But what I think is that for a variety of reasons, media does not recognize the reality of what's going on in this country today. And we have got to do that. And that means it's not just 40 million people living in poverty. It's not just 500,000 people tonight sleeping out on the streets. That's the worst case scenario. It is half of this country living paycheck to paycheck. It is tens of millions of people who cannot afford to go to the doctor when they are sick. It is 1 out of 5 people not being able to afford the prescription drugs that their doctors prescribe. It's kids not being able to afford to go to college or leaving school with outrageous levels of student debt. It is the crisis of climate change and what it will do to our country and the rest of the world unless we deal with it. So, I think what I am trying to do is to say, look, these are the real problems facing ordinary Americans. And unless we have the courage to take on Wall Street, to take on the insurance companies and the drug companies and the military industrial complex and the fossil fuel industry. Unless we have the courage to do that, we are not going to make the kind of progress that we need to.
So in your speech, you enumerated the 21st century economic bill of rights, like you had mentioned earlier. And so you have these, and you'll be rolling out these proposals. You'll have these plans that go towards establishing these rights and these material benefits for people. What happens if say, Joe Biden is wrong, that the Republicans do not revert to some type of mean, as it were? I'm not sure what that mean was, but what happens if we have a President Sanders and you have these plans and these proposals, which sound great? Is there a meta plan, a strategy? How do these things go forward if the Republicans?
Very good. Sam, that's a absolutely right question. And look, this is what I believe, and this is, I think, what differentiates me a bit from other candidates. And this is what I believe. I think if you look at the history of real change in this country, take a deep breath and think about, all right, what are they? And I'm not talking about superficial changes, modest changes, but about real changes. Think about it. We're talking about, say, 120, 130 years ago, where workers had to engage in enormous struggle for the right to have collective bargaining and to form trade unions and end child labor. Took massive amounts of grassroots organizing and struggle to make that happen. You look at the civil rights movement and understand that real change never takes place from the top on down. It wasn't just Lyndon Johnson signing the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act. It was millions of people, African Americans and their allies, who said, you know what, we're going to end segregation in this country. All people have the right to vote, regardless of the color of their skin. You look at the women's movement. As we talk 100 years ago today, women did not have the right to vote. How did that change come about? Come about because you had some great guys, men in the Congress? Well, there were some. But that struggle basically was won because women and their male allies took to the streets. Some of them died. Some of these women gave up their lives in the struggle. If you look at the gay rights revolution that's taken place in this country over the last 30, 40 years, think about Stonewall 50 years ago. It is people with incredible courage who took to the streets, who withstood humiliation and physical attacks to say, you know what, in this country, people should have the right to love whoever they want, regardless of their gender. The environmental movement, the same. So here is the point. Every idea that I am talking about, and that is the need for health care for all, the need to have jobs that pay people a living wage and raising that minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, the need to cut prescription drug costs in half, the need for affordable housing, the need for a clean environment, the need to make sure that companies like Amazon, which made $11 billion in profits last year, don't get away with not paying a nickel in federal income tax. All of these ideas are supported by the American people. But we're not going to see the changes that we need unless there is a political revolution, unless ordinary people get involved in the political process in a way that we have never seen before. And the way we defeat Trump, the way we defeat authoritarianism, the way we defeat oligarchy is when working people and young people and all of us begin to stand up and to fight back.
Senator, as I hear you say that, I think I've probably, the first time I interviewed you was maybe close to 15 years ago on Air America. And I can't help but think as you list those things of the different movements that have taken place in this country to make change, I wonder because, for years, I think I perceived you as being very much sort of a conscience of the country. And I wonder if you have felt that your role has changed in some way, because as you make that list of things that you're talking about, it just strikes me that I know that you were involved in those fights. You don't reference yourself in those. And I wonder if in some way the past several years, that during the course of the 2015, 2016 election, you perceived your role as not just being someone who could remind the country of these things, but in some more active way, and in a way sort of returning to your roots?
Well, look, I don't see the separation, Sam. What I see is that if we're going to defeat authoritarianism, one of the points that I made this afternoon, it's not just that what FDR did was good public policy and standing up and improving the lives of working people. You know what else he did? All over Europe, countries went fascist, or in Germany, Nazi. And what he was able to do is tell the working people of this country in a very difficult moment that government was there for them, that in America, the President of the United States would stand for them. So we're looking at not just good public policy, we're looking at good politics. We're saying the working people today are working 2 or 3 jobs. You know what? That doesn't have to be the case. People who have no health care. Get involved in the political process, get a government that's going to elect, that's going to represent working people, and we can bring about change. And in doing that, we can fend off the authoritarianism, the oligarchy that Trump represents. So what I'm talking about here is my belief, and recent polling has suggested that I can beat Trump in this country. Some of the polls out there have me beating him by a double-digit number, and especially in battleground states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So I think in this case, to answer your question, good policy, standing up with working people, is good politics as well. Do
you think that with your sort of, like, I guess, the more recognition and more, in many respects, political power that you've developed has led you to more opportunities to put that to use? I mean, I'm thinking about things like your work with getting Amazon to raise their wages, going to the Walmart meeting, frankly, the War Powers Act with Yemen. Right. I mean, these are all things. These were intractable issues in some respects, and you have been able to pry them loose. In at least.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think that is correct, and I think in the case of Disney, for example, we heard from Disney workers who are marching around Anaheim, Disneyland in Anaheim, California, in Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck outfits, and they were making $10-11 an hour. And we stood with those workers, and we forced Disney, frankly, to pay their workers $15 an hour. And Amazon, the same thing. They were paying workers $10, $11, $12 an hour. We heard from these Amazon workers. We used our social media. We did everything we could, and Jeff Bezos and Amazon said, okay, we'll pay their workers $15 an hour. And as you indicated, I've been working with the Fight for 15 people at McDonald's. We just in Iowa the other day marching. There's some incredibly brave people who just went on strike. They left their jobs at McDonald's, and they said, you know what, we can't make it on $10, $11 an hour. We need a living wage. And I went to the Walmart board of directors. We'll see what happens there. But, we're going to continue our effort to tell the wealthiest family in this country, the Walton family who owns Walmart, that if they cannot pay their workers starvation wages.
How much of your work on the War Powers Act in regards to Yemen and frankly calling with Representative Ro Khanna for the freedom of Lula from imprisonment is tied into this sort of movement that you see that is rising across the globe?
Right. I mean, look, one of the things that we have managed to do, for example, is to raise the issue of Yemen, which is an unbelievable and horrific human tragedy. I mean, the UN estimates that if we don't stop this war and get humanitarian aid in there, hundreds of thousands of people will be dead by the end of this year, and that millions could die of famine if we do not end the war in years to come. And I was very proud to work with Ro, to work with some conservative Republicans, frankly, in the Senate, to say that the president does not have the authority, does not have the constitutional right to get the United States involved in that war, and we won it. For the first time in 45 years, we used the War Powers Act for a majority vote in the House and the Senate. Not surprisingly, of course, Trump vetoed it. We weren't able to overcome the veto. But that was a major step forward in getting the Congress to reclaim its constitutional responsibilities over war making, which has essentially been taken over by presidents for many years.
Lastly, Senator, I know you're busy here. What do you think is the greatest challenge that your campaign is facing right now? I mean, what do you feel that you need to achieve, particularly leading up over the next couple of months before Iowa, but into the campaign?
Well, we have, I think, in an unprecedented way, Sam, we have over 1 million people in every congressional district in the United States of America signed up to volunteer and work on this campaign. And it ain't easy. And I think to answer your question, the challenge that we face is how we help build this unprecedented grassroots movement, which not only will we need to win the election and to defeat Trump, but also to transform this country. And that's what we're wrestling with right now. And it ain't easy. It really is not. But making that million-plus people into an effective fighting machine is, I think, the key challenge that we face right now.
And that's one that, are you contemplating too, like how you keep that machine to function in the event that you win, or frankly, even in the event that you lose?
Absolutely. The answer is absolutely yes. I mean, that ties into what I believe is the political revolution. All right, I think I got to get off right now.
Senator Sanders, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Right, bye-bye.